My wife didn't just betray me, she planned to erase me. She wanted my children, my fortune, and even my name, all with the help of the man I once called a friend. But the game they were playing had rules they didn't understand because I wrote them. And before this ended, they would learn exactly what that meant. Have you ever faced a betrayal so deep it forced you to fight for everything that mattered? Share your thoughts below. Your story might remind someone that integrity can still win. My name's Wade Coleman. I'm 46 years old, and this is the story of how I turned the greatest betrayal of my life into a fight for truth, justice, and my children. I sat in the dim light of my garage workshop, the steady hum of my air compressor filling the silence around me. On my laptop screen, a high-definition video played in a loop, dash cam footage I'd pulled from my work truck's memory card. She sat draped across the passenger seat of Mason Torres' BMW in the parking lot of Chili's on Preston Road, laughing as Mason leaned over to whisper something in her ear. That soundless footage told me everything I needed to know. The way Jessica tilted her head back, the way her hand lingered on Mason's arm, the way Mason leaned in, whispering something that made her smile like a woman who believed she'd already won. On her wrist was an expensive watch she claimed I'd bought her for our anniversary, one that glinted under the restaurant's parking lot lights as she lifted her hand to touch his face. Mason's lips moved, and even without audio, I could read the words. After the divorce. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my expression unreadable. 12 years of marriage reduced to pixels on a dashboard camera. Jessica had always been ambitious, but this was more than ambition. This was stone-cold calculation. I switched windows, pulling up a folder I'd been compiling for weeks. Each file was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought we'd built together. Text messages between Jessica and Mason scrolled across the screen, their words cold as a January morning in the oil patch. Mason wrote, "The prenup won't matter if we can prove he's been neglecting the kids for work. Your mother's connections will guarantee you full custody." Jessica's reply was worse than anything I'd prepared myself to see. "Shane and Lauren barely know him anyway. He chose the oil fields over family years ago. We'll make sure they understand that." I leaned back in my folding chair, exhaling slowly. Hell, I'd been betrayed before in my line of work. Contractors cutting corners on safety equipment, supervisors falsifying inspection reports. But this was different. This was personal. They weren't just cheating on me. They were rewriting my life, turning me into a villain in my children's eyes, erasing the years I'd sacrificed to keep my family comfortable and secure. I replayed Jessica's messages in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the footage of her with Mason. She wasn't just leaving me. She was orchestrating my destruction with the same precision she once used to process insurance claims for workplace accidents. My eyes drifted around the garage workshop, and for the first time, I really looked at my own home. Upstairs, the suburban house was filled with furniture Jessica had chosen, art pieces she'd hung, rugs she'd insisted on buying from that expensive store in Dallas. None of it reflected me. Not the man who'd grown up in East Texas trailer parks, who'd built his drilling business from nothing, who valued function over flash. Even the family photos on the mantle had been arranged by her, carefully curated moments that looked perfect but felt hollow now. I wondered how much of our marriage had been genuine, how much had been performance for the world, for Mason, for her powerful family. I turned back to the screen, my jaw tightening, not with rage, but with resolve. Rage was for amateurs, for people who reacted without thinking. I'd built my entire career on never reacting, only acting with precision. If Jessica and Mason wanted to turn this into a game of strategy, they'd chosen the wrong opponent. I switched off the laptop, the garage falling into a deeper silence. My hands moved methodically, pulling a thick folder from the locked toolbox beside my workbench. Inside were environmental reports, water quality tests, and geological surveys I'd been compiling for months, long before I even confirmed the affair. I'd suspected something was wrong with more than just my marriage. Jessica trusted me with everything financial. She'd never paid attention to the details, never questioned the documents I put in front of her. That trust, the one part of our marriage she'd never doubted, was about to become her most expensive mistake. I placed the folder on my workbench, opening it to the first page. My reflection stared back at me from the glossy photograph clipped to the top. A picture of Jessica and Mason together at a charity fundraiser months ago, smiling for the cameras while plotting my downfall behind the scenes. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it all, the loss of the woman I thought I knew, the betrayal from a man who'd handled half the accident claims in Collin County, the threat to my children's future. Then, just as quickly, I buried it. This wasn't the time for emotions. This was preparation, and preparation was what I did best. I closed the folder, my expression hardening into the same quiet determination that had made me one of the most respected drilling supervisors in North Texas. Jessica and Mason had made their move. Now it was my turn. Back in 2010, before life became a maze of distrust and whispered accusations, I was a man still trying to adjust to civilian life after 8 years working oil rigs from Midland to Beaumont. I'd traded the nomadic roughneck lifestyle for the more stable world of drilling supervision and equipment rental. That's when I met Jessica Foster, a sharp insurance adjuster who seemed to understand the risks and rewards of my industry. Our connection was fast, almost reckless. I wasn't the type to believe in love at first sight, but Jessica's confidence, her ambition, and the way she carried herself in a room full of oil field veterans pulled me in like a magnet. Within a year, we were married. Friends called it impulsive. My drilling buddies warned me that people who climb too quickly in professional circles are often driven by something other than love. But I didn't care. I believed I'd found someone who saw the man behind the hard hat. 3 years later, the twins arrived. Shane and Lauren, bright-eyed reminders of why I fought so hard to build a stable life. For a while, it seemed perfect. Jessica climbing the corporate ladder at her insurance firm, me securing contracts with major drilling operations, and both of us building the life we dreamed about. What Jessica never fully understood was the cost of my dedication. Oil field supervision wasn't just equipment checks and safety meetings. It was pre-dawn calls about equipment failures, emergency repairs on drilling sites scattered across 3 counties, and long hours managing crews who depended on my expertise to keep them safe and employed. I juggled it all, rarely complaining. My nights often ended in the garage reviewing geological surveys while Jessica attended company dinners or professional networking events. I told myself it was fine. She was building her career, and I was protecting ours. Every time I tucked Shane and Lauren into bed after returning from a job site, I promised myself I'd be there more often. But Jessica thrived on the lifestyle my work provided. She loved the dinners at country clubs, the invitations to charity galas, and the quiet acknowledgement among her peers that she was married to someone who mattered in the Texas energy sector. The first cracks weren't loud arguments or obvious betrayals. They were subtle as a slow gas leak. Late-night phone calls Jessica didn't explain, hushed conversations when I entered the room, and an increasing number of business trips she took alone to handle complex claims. At first, I ignored it. I was trained to spot equipment problems before they became disasters, but I wanted to believe the woman I loved was still the same one who held my hand in the hospital when Shane was born 6 weeks premature. But by 2019, things had shifted like sand under a derrick. Jessica's charm had become calculated. She spent more time with people I didn't know, lawyers and adjusters who seemed more interested in her than the cases she handled. She grew colder toward me, often criticizing the long hours I worked, as if forgetting that those same hours funded her carefully curated lifestyle. Me, being the professional I was, tried to fight for our marriage with quiet consistency. More family dinners, more time. Coaching Shane's little league team and helping Lauren with her science projects, even when I was exhausted from 14-hour shifts. But every gesture felt like throwing pebbles into a storm. By late 2020, even my crew noticed something was off. One night, while grabbing beers at a roadhouse near Lake Louisville, I finally admitted to my foreman, "Hell, I can spot a gas leak from 50 yards out, but I can't figure out what's happening in my own home." What I didn't know then was that Jessica's ambition was about to cross a line I never imagined she'd step over. The real turning point began on a quiet Sunday morning when I sat alone in my garage, sifting through environmental impact reports. 15 years of oil field work had taught me one thing that never failed. Patterns don't lie. Jessica's sudden aggression in our marriage, her family's growing interference, and the smug confidence she carried these days weren't random. There was a deeper play going on, and I was finally ready to uncover it. The smoking gun came buried in sealed EPA violation reports I obtained, through a contact who still owed me a favor from our roughneck days. As I scrolled through the scanned files, my jaw tightened like a pipe wrench. The case was from 13 years ago, an incident involving Jessica's mother, County Commissioner Rachel Foster. The official record stated that Rachel had expedited the cleanup of a minor equipment malfunction at a drilling site near Lake Ray Roberts. Standard bureaucratic language, clean and sanitized, but the sealed files told the real story. The malfunction had been a massive wastewater spill that contaminated groundwater for miles. Rachel's influence had buried the truth under bureaucratic language and sealed testimonies. I sat back, staring at the screen like I'd just struck oil in my own backyard. This wasn't just an ethical lapse. This was environmental cover-up that had contaminated groundwater affecting 3 farming communities. Jessica had always idolized her mother's power in local government, but now that power was a loaded gun, one I could aim in the right direction if I chose. I didn't stop there. For 2 weeks, I quietly built a case like I was planning a complex drilling operation. Every detail mattered. I pieced together water quality reports, campaign contributions, and geological surveys. Cole Anderson, Jessica's father, was no innocent bystander either. A paper trail connected him to strategic loans approved for cleanup contractors just days after the incident was sealed. The Fosters had built their entire public image on environmental responsibility and community service. But I now held the proof of the rot beneath it all. As I compiled the evidence, I remained methodical, not emotional. Every document was cross-referenced like I was checking safety protocols on a drilling rig. Every water sample was verified by independent labs. Every financial transfer was confirmed through public records. I knew how fragile leverage could be if it wasn't airtight, and this had to be bulletproof as a blowout preventer. By the time I was done, the file was thick with undeniable proof. One call to the right journalist or state investigator would destroy the Foster reputation forever. But I wasn't reckless. I didn't want to humiliate Jessica publicly, not yet. My goal was control, not chaos. So I waited, letting Jessica and her lawyer make the first move. That moment arrived sooner than expected, like a pressure spike you don't see coming. A week later, I sat across from Drew Mitchell, a small-town family attorney known for his aggressive tactics in divorce cases. Drew slid a thick packet across the Formica table at the Collin County Courthouse with the kind of smug smile only lawyers like him seem to perfect. "Sign these," Drew said, leaning back in his plastic chair. "Jessica will retain full custody of the twins. She'll also keep the house, the vehicles, and 60% of your drilling business assets. It's in everyone's best interest to make this clean. Otherwise, we'll litigate aggressively, and I can assure you, Wade, you will lose." I didn't flinch, didn't argue. Instead, I picked up those papers, glanced at them briefly, and then set them down like they were nothing more than junk mail. My calm unnerved Drew, who shifted slightly in his chair, waiting for anger that never came. Like watching a gauge that should be redlining, but stays steady in the green. I reached into my work jacket and pulled out a single envelope, placing it neatly on the table. My voice was quiet, measured, every word deliberate as a wellhead valve adjustment. "Deliver this to your client." Drew frowned, hesitating for the first time since I'd walked in. "What is this?" "Just deliver it," I replied, my gaze steady as a laser level. "Tell Jessica to read it before she decides how aggressive she really wants to be." Inside that envelope was a neatly organized summary of the Foster family's darkest secrets. It included copies of the sealed EPA reports, water quality tests tracing Cole's financial connections, and photographs of Rachel meeting privately with state environmental officials weeks before the case was dismissed. The implication was clear as crude oil. Push this divorce too far, and the Fosters would lose everything they'd spent decades building. I stood slowly, gathering my things without another word. My calmness filled the room like natural gas, invisible but heavy, and dangerous if someone struck a match. The lawyer stared at that envelope like it might explode. As I walked out, my mind was steady, focused. For the first time in months, the balance of power had shifted like tectonic plates beneath a drilling site. Jessica thought she had me cornered like a roughneck with nowhere to run. But now every move she made would have to account for the quiet storm I'd just unleashed. The first call came just after midnight. I sat. In my garage, the house quiet except for the hum of my equipment compressor. Jessica's name flashed across my phone screen, I let it ring until it stopped, like ignoring a false alarm on a gas detector. A minute later, it rang again. This time, Mason Torres, her affair partner and self-appointed legal strategist. I ignored that one too, leaning back in my chair with the same calm I'd carried into Drew Mitchell's office earlier that day. The third call came less than 5 minutes later. "Rachel Foster," I answered, knowing exactly who it was before I picked up. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice sharp, but carrying a tremor of unease like a pipe under too much pressure. Rachel was used to intimidation, but now it wavered at the edges. I spoke evenly, my tone clipped and deliberate as a drilling report. "Justice." There was silence on the line, heavy as drilling mud. Rachel inhaled slowly, then exhaled as if weighing every word like they were gold nuggets. "You think you can threaten me with half-baked accusations?" "They're not accusations," I replied, steady as a wellhead. "They're EPA violation reports, water contamination studies, financial records. You've spent years keeping the Lake Ray Roberts spill buried under lies, but the truth is still out there like oil under pressure. You know it, and now, so do I." Rachel's voice softened, almost pleading. "What do you want, Wade?" "I want 3 things," I said without hesitation, laying it out like a drilling plan. Jessica withdraws the divorce petition immediately and signs full custody of Shane and Lauren over to me. Mason stops representing her and refers all her legal matters to someone else. And you resign from the county commission quietly before the state investigators get to you first. Fail to do any of this, and those farming families finally get justice. I'll make sure every journalist in North Texas has what they need to blow this open like a gas well blowout. Rachel didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight as an over-torqued fitting. "You're bluffing." My answer was calm and final as a shut-in valve. "You already know I'm not." I hung up before she could respond, leaving her in silence thick as crude oil. By morning, the cracks in the Foster family's armor were already beginning to show like stress fractures in steel. I hadn't sent any direct threats to the media, but I'd made sure that an anonymous tip, complete with vague but enticing details about the Lake Ray Roberts case, landed in the inboxes of 3 environmental journalists. I also sent a carefully redacted version of the water quality reports to a contact at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It wasn't enough to confirm the entire scandal, but it was enough to raise questions the Fosters couldn't afford. Mason was the first to panic, like a greenhorn roughneck who'd never seen a blowout. By late afternoon, he left a furious voicemail, his voice cracking as he shouted that I was destroying everything. He called again an hour later, this time begging for a meeting. I didn't answer. Let him sweat like a man working August heat in the Permian Basin. Jessica's resolve broke next. She showed up at my garage unannounced, her business attire wrinkled, her usual composure slipping like a worn drill bit. "You're ruining us," she said, trying to sound angry, but her tone betrayed fear thick as drilling mud. "Do you even care what this will do to Shane and Lauren?" I stared at her for a long moment before answering. "I care about them more than anyone in your family ever has. That's why I'm doing this." By evening, the story had begun to grow legs like rumors on a drilling platform. News outlets hinted at a long-buried environmental cover-up involving a respected county commissioner. Online forums speculated about corruption in the Foster family, and for the first time in her career, Rachel skipped her scheduled commission meeting. She knew I wasn't bluffing, and she knew the clock was running out like pressure bleeding from a damaged line. The tension in Drew Mitchell's office was suffocating as a gas pocket underground. I sat at the far end of the conference table, my posture relaxed as a man who'd found the sweet spot in a drilling operation, while Jessica sat stiffly across from me, her hands trembling as she gripped a pen. The thick stack of documents in front of her represented everything she'd fought for: control, custody, wealth, and she was about to sign it all away. Drew, usually confident and aggressive as a pushy tool pusher, looked pale and distracted, his gaze fixed on the tabletop like he wanted to be anywhere but there. "Are we doing this or not?" I asked calmly, my voice cutting through the silence like a diamond drill bit through rock. Jessica glared at me, but the fight in her eyes was gone, extinguished like a flare that had burned out. Her mother had resigned from the commission after my ultimatum. Mason had referred all her legal matters to another firm, and state environmental investigators had begun making quiet inquiries into the Foster family's business dealings. Every advantage she thought she had was gone, vanished like natural gas into the atmosphere. She lowered her eyes and scribbled her name at the bottom of the custody agreement, then the property settlement, and finally the business asset division. Each signature felt like another pipe joint giving way under pressure. When she finished, she pushed the documents across the table like they were contaminated. "You win," she said bitterly, her voice hollow as an empty wellhead. I didn't move to take them right away. Instead, I leaned forward, my expression unreadable as a pressure gauge in the dark. "No, Jessica, this isn't about winning. This is about truth." I gathered the signed documents and slipped them into my work jacket. But before standing, I pulled out another envelope and set it in front of her like placing a final piece of evidence on a well site. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary as someone hearing an unexpected alarm. "Consider it a parting gift," I said, my tone as level as a construction grade. She opened the envelope and froze solid as winter crude. Inside were photographs that told a story she hadn't seen coming. Mason Torres boarding a private jet with a younger woman, their hands intertwined like lovers who thought they were invisible. Another shot showed Mason withdrawing large sums of cash from an account registered in both his and Jessica's names. The final photo captured him lounging at a resort in Costa Rica, champagne in hand, already celebrating his escape. Jessica's hand trembled like a gauge needle under pressure as she flipped through the images. This isn't real," she whispered, though her voice cracked with the weight of realization hitting her like a sledgehammer. "It's real as crude oil," I said evenly, my voice steady as a wellhead valve. "Mason drained your joint accounts 3 days ago. By now, he's probably sipping drinks on a beach somewhere tropical. Whatever he promised you, it's gone, just like everything else." Jessica's composure finally shattered like overpressured casing. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking, a muffled sob escaping her lips like steam from a relief valve. For a moment, the room was silent except for her quiet breakdown, heavy as the silence after a well goes dry. Drew looked away, uncomfortable as a city lawyer on his first rig site, but I didn't move. I simply stood, slid the documents into my jacket, and turned toward the door like a job well done. Without looking back, I said one last thing, my voice carrying the finality of a well-being capped. "You wanted power, Jessica. Now you have nothing left to fight for." I walked out of that office like walking away from a completed drilling operation, leaving behind the wreckage of lies and betrayal that had nearly destroyed my family. 6 months later, the world felt different for me, like the difference between a dry hole and a gusher. On a warm Saturday afternoon, I stood on my back porch, leaning against the wooden railing, as I watched Shane and Lauren chase each other across the backyard. Their laughter filled the air, bright and unburdened as a clear Texas sky, a sound I hadn't heard so freely in years. They didn't understand the full scope of what had happened, the legal battles, the threats, or the quiet war I'd waged to protect them. All they knew was that their dad had fought for them, and hell, that was enough. Shane stopped to catch his breath, his cheeks flushed from running like he'd been working a hard shift, while Lauren squealed and darted toward the swings. I smiled to myself, a quiet pride settling in my chest, like the satisfaction of bringing in a clean well. This was why I'd endured every sleepless night. Why I'd chosen strategy over rage, like choosing the right drill bit for the job. I hadn't fought for revenge. I'd fought for this simple, peaceful moment. Life had shifted in other ways too, like equipment running smoother after a complete overhaul. Coleman Drilling, the company I'd built before the Fosters tried to strip it from me, was thriving again. Word of my victory had spread through the Texas oil community faster than gossip on a drilling platform, and clients who once hesitated to sign with me now competed for contracts. My reputation, already solid as bedrock, was stronger than ever, but I didn't bury myself in work the way I once had. Late nights reviewing geological surveys had been replaced with family dinners, homework help, and evenings teaching Shane to change oil in the garage while Lauren handed me tools and asked a million questions about everything. I'd also learned to let go of anger like releasing pressure from an overloaded system. I could have pursued the Fosters further, could have ensured every last piece of their influence was destroyed like a controlled demolition, but I'd already accomplished what mattered most. Rachel was disgraced and out of office. Cole's bank was under federal scrutiny for environmental loan irregularities. Mason was a fugitive living off whatever cash he'd managed to grab before running. And Jessica was no longer a threat. She was just another person trying to rebuild from the ruins of her own choices, working as a low-level claims adjuster for a small firm in Garland. No more charity galas, no more power lunches, just honest work for honest pay. The public reckoning had come faster than a blowout you don't see coming. Within a week of Jessica signing those final agreements, Rachel Foster announced her resignation from the county commission. The statement she released to the press cited personal health reasons, but everyone in North Texas knew the truth. The leaked environmental records were now part of a growing federal inquiry, and whispers about the Lake Ray Roberts case dominated local news cycles. What had once been a tightly controlled narrative of integrity and public service was unraveling in real time like a rotted rope under tension. I hadn't spoken a single word to the media. I didn't need to. The truth, once freed, did its own damage like natural gas finding a spark. The farming families affected by the groundwater contamination finally got their day in court. Armed with the evidence I'd provided through intermediaries, they filed lawsuits that tied up every major Foster asset. Decades of cultivated influence and wealth were collapsing under the weight of the truth like a house of cards in a Texas wind. Jessica's downfall was quieter, but no less complete. The divorce withdrawal and custody agreement had left her financially cornered like a wildcat. Well, that comes up dry, and Mason's theft of their shared accounts ensured she had no safety net. Within months, she was forced to sell her luxury cars and the few personal investments she still controlled, just to stay afloat. The high society invitations that once defined her life vanished like morning dew in August heat. People who had once fawned over her stopped returning her calls. Eventually, she took that position as a low-level claims adjuster, processing the same kinds of workplace accident claims she'd once supervised. There were no charity galas, no luxury penthouses to boast about, just cubicles and commission-based paychecks. Occasionally, I'd hear about her through mutual acquaintances in the insurance world. She was polite, they said, even humbled, though her pride still showed in the way she carried herself like a decommissioned oil derrick, still standing, but no longer productive. For the first time in years, Jessica no longer had any real power to wield. She existed on the margins now, far from the life she'd once sacrificed everything to control. Inside my office, a single photograph remained on the shelf. It was of Jessica taken years ago, back when we were still a family, before ambition poisoned everything good between us. I kept it not out of lingering love or nostalgia, but as a reminder. Trust, I'd learned, was not something to give away freely like free samples at a trade show. It was something to be earned carefully and never taken for granted. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything gold like liquid prosperity, I stepped off the porch and joined my children in the yard. Shane tossed me a football, and Lauren cheered when I caught it easily, her voice bright as a gas flare against the evening sky. For the first time in years, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid as good concrete foundation. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, earned through patience, sacrifice, and a quiet determination to protect what truly mattered. Some betrayals try to take everything from you, but sometimes they leave you with exactly what you need.